Hello again. Today we're going to talk about what is almost universally cited as one of Dylan's most underrated songs. Universally and correctly, Spanish Harlem Incident, the third song from another side of Bob Dylan. This song is only 2 minutes and 22 seconds long, only has 166 words, which is, just a joke for a Bob Dylan song. 3 stanzas, 8 lines each. And maybe because it's so short and sweet, it just gets lumped in with Dylan's minor songs. Maybe part of it is that there's 3 short songs on this album to start it off, and then the fourth, Chimes of Freedom, is the first major song of the album and more familiar territory for Dylan. It's the kind of song that makes this man here, Professor Sean Wilentz, professor of history at Princeton, go gaga. And one time on Colbert, he was asked, for somebody who's new to Dylan, what song would you recommend they listen to first? He picked Chimes of Freedom. Bruce Springsteen didn't just cover the song, he named a whole album after it. So maybe that's part of the problem with Spanish Harlem Incident getting somewhat overlooked. The song is a very brief tale. It's our narrator becoming enamored with a young lady, a woman, in, of course, Spanish Harlem. Spanish Harlem was not the first area in New York City to be identified with an immigrant population. We're looking at a picture, great old picture, we're going to see a lot of great old pictures in this video, of Little Italy, as you'll see in the upper left. So Spanish Harlem continued that tradition, and it was a very, very blue-collar area. And for someone like Dylan who grew up in the Midwest, it must have seemed pretty exotic, and the narrator's affection is set on an exotic figure, a gypsy gal. Gypsies, or as we should say nowadays, the Roma, are not solely associated with Spain by any stretch, of course, but they are famously present there. The association is pretty strong, stronger than with other big-name European countries. My parents, long before I came along, had an impromptu dinner with gypsies in Spain one time. But anyway, you can see on this map where the neighborhood is located, in case you're curious. Back to the song, there's not much written about it. Of course there is some, because it's a Bob Dylan song, but not as much as there should be. But what really surprised me is that, at least in the sources I found, and I went through as much as I could find, nobody mentions the possible inspiration for this number. They write of it as if it just sprang up out of nowhere, this song, and it does have that feel in a very positive way, but, with Dylan, it's tradition to sit there and think, okay, what got in his head that then caused him to write this song? And as we've talked about many times on this channel, that's a very important part of his creative process. Sometimes he will absolutely take another song and just rework it in his mind until it's unrecognizable. Other times, of course, he will just take another song and stick his own words on it, fearlessly or shamelessly, depending on your point of view. And many times, as I've noted on this channel, people will mention possible inspirations for songs even when the link seems tenuous at best, if not completely imagined. That's what makes the lack of references to this song so surprising. Spanish Harlem, from 1961 by Ben E. King. If you think you don't know Ben E. King, you actually do, because he was the guy who sang Stand By Me. A massive hit with very long legs. Dylan has mentioned that song at least twice in interviews. And back to Ben E. King's Spanish Harlem, that was a top 10 hit. So I'm going to say there's absolutely no chance Bob Dylan wasn't familiar with this song. And although there seems to be no musical inspiration or lifting when it comes to this one, thematically, the link seems to be just unavoidable. Ben E. King's song was about falling in love with a girl from Spanish Harlem, and so is Dylan's. Speaking of odds, knowing what we know about Dylan, knowing he was the kind of songwriter who could start in his head with a song like La Bamba and end up with Like a Rolling Stone, I think it's very likely this song here was in his head when he created Spanish Harlem Incident. Dylan's song charges right out of the gate and directly addresses this mysterious woman that he seems to be just completely enraptured with, as he sees her strolling down these streets. It seems it was a hot summer day, or an imagined hot summer day, when he encounters her on these streets. Gypsy gal, the hands of Harlem cannot hold you to its heat. Your temperature is too hot for taming. Your flaming feet are burning up the street. But she's much more than a woman who's just so beautiful that it stops him cold. The second half of that same stanza, the first stanza. I am homeless, come and take me into the reach of your rattling drums. Let me know, babe, about my fortune, down along my restless palms. And that is precisely 1/3 of the song out of the way already. But so much more has happened within those 8 lines than in a typical opening stanza, a pop song about, seeing a beautiful woman and having that lightning bolt moment. That's a very well-worn path and maybe even trite songwriting convention. But here, notice the last two lines return to the very first line. Gypsy gal was not just a throwaway phrase. No, she's an actual fortune teller, or he thinks she is. And he needs her in a very deep way, even though he's seeing her for the first time, right? I am homeless, my restless palms. Phonetically, there's all kinds of typical Dylan tricks here. Gypsy gal, obviously GG, but notice like GGHH in that first line. Gypsy gal, the hands of Harlem, not hold you to its heat. So look how the H sound, it ties that couplet together. Hands, Harlem, hold, heat. And why isn't she gypsy girl or gypsy woman or anything like that? Because gypsy gal has the A sound that hands also has. Gypsy gal, the hands of Harlem. So that A sound kind of ties together all the words in the first line. And it's T in the next line. Your temperature's too hot for taming. The T sound is not just at the start of temperature, but in the middle of the word as well. Then two. Hot, taming. It appears 5 times in just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 words. And then the next line, I'm reading it the way it's sung, not the way it's here in the official lyrics. Your flaming feet are burning up the streets. Obviously alliteration with flaming and feet, but internal rhyme with feet and street. And this is a real signature thing from Dylan. And there's so many connection points. He's stitching together the lines in so many different ways. Can be, from one line to another. It can also be within one line. So stitching the first half of a line to the second. Then taking that second half and having it stitched to the second half of the next line, etc. One line, the written lyric is, your flaming feet burn up the street. But when he was actually recording the song, he intuitively tied it together better. Your flaming feet are burning up the street. Flaming, burning. Back to the first line. Why is it hands of Harlem? Why isn't it gypsy gal, the streets of Harlem cannot hold you to its heat? That would make more sense logically, but obviously hands of Harlem sounds better because of the H alliteration, but then as we talked about before, it also then uses the A sound again and again, all in that one line. We should note, by the way, that this is the first appearance of something that's going to come back in Dylan's career. In fact, more than once, wanting answers from this gypsy woman, from a fortune-telling woman. Like this song here from New Morning, Went to See the Gypsy. And then later in the 70s, we have the song One More Cup of Coffee, where the woman he's singing to and fascinated with, again, seems to be a gypsy, and it has the lyric, your sister sees the future like your mama and yourself. So that song, again, is really kind of a reprise of the overall template for the one we're talking about today. And let's not forget Idiot Wind, with the line, I ran into the fortune teller who said beware of lightning that might strike. Even though the gender of that fortune teller is not stated or implied, I think we can safely assume it was a woman. So we have this through line in Dylan's career, which is interesting, and starts very early on, right? 1964, all the way through the mid-70s, with these kind of spiritually powerful women who have an insight that men don't. Move on to the next stanza, which is the middle one, because there's only 3 in the whole song. And it does the same thing the first one does, where it's bifurcated. The first half is about her and how amazing she is, and how awestruck he is by her, and then the second half is about how needy he is, and again how he needs her in a very important way, like his fate is entwined with hers. Or it might be more accurate to say, his depends on her. Gypsy gal, you got me swallowed. I have fallen far beneath. Your pearly eyes so fast and slashing, and your flashing diamond teeth. The night is pitch black, come and make my pale face fit into place, I'll please. Let me know, babe, I'm nearly drowning, if it's you my lifelines trace. So just like previously, here the end of the stanza returns to this note about her being able to tell fortunes, specifically using palmistry. The penultimate line of the previous stanza, let me know, babe, about my fortune. Penultimate line in this stanza, let me know, babe, I'm nearly drowning. And of course, both of those stanzas started with Gypsy Gal. After this part of the song, now we know that what he wanted to know about earlier, let me know about my fortune, specifically what he wants to know is, does he end up with her? Let me know, I'm nearly drowning, like he's dying to find out. It's you, my lifeline's trace. If his palm tells the story that he's going to end up with her. And again, we have symmetry between the two stanzas where it's really, really important that she helps him out. Here in this one, notice the third to last line and a little bit of the preceding one. Come and make my pale face fit into place, ah, please. That's a really amazing device. His face doesn't even fit into place unless she helps him. And notice it's a pale face. Why pale? Why not just my face, etc.? Well, pale then matches up with place and please, so you have that letter, that alliteration. Pale, place, please. But also pale face and place work really well together. This is how precise Dylan is with the language. Take pale and face. If you mashed those two words up together, you would end up with something very much like place. So what do you call that? I don't know. It's not rhyming. It's not alliteration. It's not internal rhyming. Face and place rhyme internally, but that's different than what we're talking about here. Face and fit, alliterate. Pale and place alliterate, but that's all separate from what I'm mentioning here. But all of those things work with the dynamic I'm mentioning here, all in this one short line. Again, that's this extraordinary stitching together, like we talked about before with a different example, and that's all on top of just what a remarkable poetic device it is, regardless of those technicalities. Only you can make my face fit into place. But of course, it was a pale face, like we mentioned, and we left off one of the reasons why the face is pale. It's because, or also because, that's in unspoken contrast to her face. We intuitively know she has a darker complexion than he does. This is in Spanish Harlem. She's a gypsy. So of course he thinks of his own face as pale because mesmerized by her darker face. And notice in the lines just preceding all this, he is literally fixated on her face, her eyes, her teeth. Back to the unspoken part, this is similar to what he did in Blowin' in the Wind, where the white dove is juxtaposed against a cannonball, and he doesn't have to tell us that a cannonball is black. We already know that. So the contrast works on multiple levels, not just the surface one, where one is a symbol of peace and another a symbol of war. And this is why her eyes were pearly and her teeth were diamond and flashing, because they're set against her beautiful dark skin. I've talked about this phrase before, invited to, when it comes to Dylan's lyrics. You're invited to imagine her dark face without him making it painfully obvious. It's subtle, and it's up to you to notice it. Conventional songwriting would just, of course, tell you that her skin is dark and beautiful. That's also why the night is pitch black. He could have just, that's not needed there, not on a surface level, but it juxtaposes with his pale face. The night is pitch black, come and make my pale face. So, like we talk about a lot, you take the two lines, put them on paper, and they match up, spatially, if you will. So you see that there? On the surface, this couplet is contrasting Dylan's pale skin with the dark night, but then what it's additionally and really doing is reminding you again, something you need to realize on your own, that her skin is dark compared to his. He hints at that 4 different times in these 8 lines without ever saying it. Here's a picture of Spanish Harlem from the 80s, by the way. Most of them have been back from around the time of the actual song. Well, there's more we could say about the second stanza, there really is, but it's more of the same techniques that we talked about. So let's move on. Like I always say, I could just go on and on about just any one section or set of lines when it comes to Dylan. End of the song. I've been wondering all about me ever since I seen you there. On the cliffs of your wildcat charms I'm riding. I know I'm around you, but I don't know where. You have slayed me, you have made me. I got to laugh halfway off my heels. I got to know, babe, will you surround me so I can tell if I am really real? This is the first stanza that doesn't start with Gypsy Gal and doesn't start with her, but with him. So we know something is different, and what's different is that the song is about to end. Dylan at this point in his career, like I talked about in the last video, is really starting to experiment with some of the poetic abstraction that we're going to see in his more famous songs and albums. And just look at the line here. On the cliffs of your wildcat charms I'm riding. That makes no logical sense, but it works wonderfully poetically. And a strong return to this theme that we've seen throughout the song, this short song so far, where he needs her almost to really exist or to be fully realized. Almost insubstantial, right? He's not fully put together. His face isn't, in place. I know I'm around you, but I don't know where. He's almost like a ghost. You have slayed me, you have made me. What a great line that is. And all of those notes, that kind of theme, which is maybe the major one of the song, really culminates at the very end, last couplet. I gotta know, babe, will you surround me so I can tell if I am really real? Fantastic closer there. And that's part of how the song is really more about him than her. Most people hear it and just think along the conventional lines of, okay, yeah, he's just blown away by this woman he's seeing, and it's about her. There she's walking down the street, her face, this and that. You know, kind of a more exotic, pretty woman. But as we've covered, there's so much more with this, this concept of fate, not just, hey, are we going to get together, that kind of a thing, but like his ultimate fate is tied into her and in some degree under her control. She has a magical insight he doesn't have, and seeing her has made him realize he might not be real in a way, or he's not fully formed. There's kind of an existential crisis mixed in with the, thunderstruck, love-filled eyes. And this exotic, entrancing creature from this exotic, to Dylan, place can resolve all of that for him. Spanish Harlem Incident. Really masterful song. Incredibly economical. I mean, I think this is going to be like a 15-minute video about a 2-minute song. That's with me restraining myself, but I don't think I'm imagining things. I think there's that much actually in there. And that is it for this installment in the video series. Thanks for watching.